about when I had a sugar daddy. And yes, I know what you're thinking. You had a sugar daddy. Yes, I did. Well, kind of. So when I was 18, I was very much into my fitness and all of my social media accounts had progress pictures. To give a little bit of background, I was already in debt at the age of 18, purely because I was in a toxic relationship, but that is a completely different story. Anyways, one day I get a message on Snapchat. Now, although I didn't know him personally, he wasn't a complete stranger. I used to post to an app that was almost like Instagram but for fitness people, and I knew him from there. I was a little bit hesitant to open the message, but when I did, I was surprised to see that he was asking for my PayPal details. There was no true reasoning behind this at first. He just said that he wanted to send me money so I could buy a game that I wanted to play, and I called his bluff. I didn't believe for a second that this random man off the internet was going to send me any money for anything. I sent over my details, and about 20 minutes later, I couldn't believe what he had sent. So after assuming that this man was joking, I had a sum of money enter my account. He had sent me £40 and insisted that I bought the game that I wanted. There was something really strange about this and I didn't know how to react. And as much as I tried, he wouldn't let me send it back. As time went on, I continued to speak to him as he was really nice, although he was triple my age. As I was into my fitness, I'll be honest, back then I was really different. I would post progress pictures in my underwear. And one day, it came up in conversation that I was struggling a little bit financially. That is where this man turned around and told me that he could help me in return for something else.
This lady just told me her husband killed her mom. Story time. So your girl was driving back home after running some errands. As I'm driving home, I see this old lady on the side of the road, leaning up against her car, crying. And I never usually do this, but I felt hella bad. And she was an old lady, so I pulled over for her. Once I pull over, tell me why this man comes out of the car. And I was like, oh, hell no, I'm not about to get kidnapped. I saw these stories on Facebook, so I locked my car and I cracked my window this much. Just a little bit so I could hear what he got to say. So he walks over to my passenger window and he's like, hey, we ran out of gas. I thought I had enough gas to get to the gas station, but we didn't. Can you help us out? And I don't know how to explain this, but you girls will understand this. You know that weird gut feeling you get, especially when you're talking to some weird person? I was getting that talking from him. And I'm like, I mean, I don't mind helping you, but I didn't want him in my car. And I think he saw that I was getting a little uncomfortable. So luckily he had one of those gas can things and I just had the wife sit in the car with me. We're driving for about a mile and she starts breaking down crying. This old woman got in my car with her gas tank and we're not even driving for that long, maybe about a mile or so. And she starts crying, breaking down crying. And she starts telling me about her hardships in life. Not gonna lie, this woman has had a very rough life. And I felt for her, I genuinely felt hella bad. I'm just sitting here driving, trying to give her words of encouragement. And we're getting closer to the gas station. She's wrapping up her cry session. And right as we're pulling in, she hits me with the, yeah, it was so hard after my husband killed my mom, but I have to keep my spirits high. And I'm sitting here like, excuse me, what? My intuition was right. I knew I had a bad feeling about him. So I asked her, that guy that I just picked you up with killed your mom? And she was like, yeah, but he found God. And I'm not even gonna lie. I cut her off and I was like, and you're still with him? Basically, she told me how he wrote her every day he was in prison, telling her sorry and she forgave him. And right before I dropped her off, I was like, you sure you're good? You can give me your number if you need any help. She gave me a number that wasn't even hers. I feel played.
I'm pregnant and being investigated by the Department of Child Services.
Oh, man.
Hello, I'm a 29-year-old, happily married. My husband and I are college educated, have respectable, stable jobs, own a home in a nice neighborhood. We're basically as prepared as anyone can be to start a family. I'm almost 9 months pregnant with our first child. The problem is that 11 years ago when my husband was a freshman in college, he was arrested for possession of marijuana. He pled guilty and did his time in probation without a problem, passing every drug test along the way. He has not touched any other illegal substance since, and we rarely even drink, and haven't at all in over a year. I have no criminal record. It was a stupid mistake he made as a foolish 18-year-old, and he's worked hard to put it behind him. Someone has apparently contacted Child Services in our area. This accusation is being taken very seriously because of my husband's record. We have been as cooperative as could be with our caseworker. We've been interviewed, our home has been examined, and she found nothing remotely serious or incriminating. We have both taken tests and passed. Our caseworker says everything looks just fine so far. Unfortunately, she also says that there's still the possibility that our child could be taken from us in the labor and delivery ward. I was devastated and horrified to hear that. When I asked why, she said it was, quote, not up to her, and we'll have to wait and see, which made absolutely no sense to me. I feel like there's something she isn't telling me, but I have no experience with DCS, and I'm not aware of anything we could have possibly done wrong. I'm scared and confused. Do I need a lawyer? Thanks for reading, and thanks in advance for your help. There's an update.
Okay.
Do you want me to just read the update first?
It sounds like you want to.
Say your comments, what you're thinking right away.
I don't have a comment. I think I have a question. I'm curious as to who reported that.
Very fishy. Very fishy, right?
Yeah.
I'll read the top comment on the post.
Okay.
And then just do the update.
Yeah.
And then talk about it because that's where it gets weird.
Okay.
I am a former Indiana CPS investigator/assessor. Something here is not making any sense at all unless the law has changed greatly in the last few years when I left the department. As of this moment, you are pregnant, correct? You don't have any children? They are investigating the fetus? Someone replies, former CPS worker here too. Agree with you. CPS does not investigate pregnant women with no current children. Something is not right. And someone goes, if people who have worked with CPS are saying something is off here, maybe it's an idea to contact CPS yourself, not through any contact the worker you have been in contact with has given you, but by finding their number on the internet and ringing directly. Ask if the worker actually works there, for starters. I've heard a few stories of people posing as CPS maliciously.
I didn't even think of that.
Most parents will send their kids to a boarding school for drug problems or behavioral issues, but my parents sent me for a different reason. If you don't know already, my stepdad was pretty abusive towards me starting at a young age. If you want to know more about that, check out my childhood playlist. And one day I just had enough of it, and I walked out of my house with nothing on me. I didn't take anything, I just walked out. So I ran away. And a little less than 2 months later, police found me a third way across the country. So my parents decided to send me to a boarding school right after they found me so that I couldn't run away, so that I had to stay somewhere. She wanted to make sure that I was safe. My mom wanted to make sure I was safe and that I couldn't run away and that I couldn't harm myself. If you're wondering how I got a third way across the country, just don't. Just don't. I don't want to talk about it. I'm sorry. It wasn't fun. And you may be thinking, instead of sending me to boarding school, why didn't my mom just kick out my stepdad? Because he was the reason why I ran away, right? Well, my stepdad is a very talented manipulator, and he convinced my mom that I was a very, very disrespectful child, that I just broke all the rules just because I wanted to, and that I was on a bunch of drugs and all of this other stuff that's just not true. And my mom unfortunately believed him and kept me in the boarding school for 1.5 years. Were things any better when I got home? Not really. My stepdad had calmed down a bit, like he wasn't yelling and hitting as much, but he was still the same person. I still felt the same vibes from him. I still saw him as my abuser, so living with him after the boarding school was just as difficult as living with him before. And I had begged and pleaded the people at the boarding school not to send me back home, and they told me that they wouldn't. They would find a different option for me to live. And they didn't do that. They just sent me home. They didn't give 2 fucks. They did not give any fucks. They just said, oh, you're done with the program? Okay, go back right into your abusive household. Because that'll make things a lot better. I don't know. Fuck. My name is Mary Jane, and I make videos about a boarding school that I was sent to when I was a teenager. Yes, we had to wear uniforms in the day. At nighttime, we could wear our own pajamas as long as they were approved by staff. People were also asking me, couldn't I just run away or escape? I tried about 6 times. Each attempt failed. There was one girl that ran away and made it all the way back to her hometown, but after about a month, she was found and sent back to the boarding school. So if you did manage to escape and make it somewhere, they would find you and just send you back. It's pointless. You guys want to know one thing I really fucking hated about that school? Really hated? They timed our showers. They gave us 10 minutes total. Not 10 minutes in the water, 10 minutes in the bathroom. So you had to go into the bathroom, get undressed, go in the shower, take your shower, get out of the shower, dry off, and get dressed, all within 10 minutes, or you'd get in trouble. And we all took our showers in the same hour, and they had us, like, on a list. And if you were on the bottom of the list, your shower was going to be cold, and there was nothing you could do about it. Also, the food there was disgusting. It was really, really gross. Especially breakfast. They would make eggs every morning, on this huge grill that I swear to God they never cleaned correctly because the eggs were always a very weird color. They were either grayish or greenish, and I'm not even fucking kidding. And it tasted so bad. It did not taste anything like eggs. So I had to dump Cholula on that bitch and shove it down my throat. Because if I did not eat my food, I would get in trouble. And that right there, forcing us to eat all of our food, had every single one of us gaining weight. I went into the boarding school weighing 98 pounds and left the boarding school weighing 180 pounds. That's not okay. I'm pretty sure that's some form of child abuse. Oh, people were also asking me if you're 18, if you can just leave. Yeah, you can just leave, but no one's gonna give you a ride unless your parents come pick you up, so it's pretty much up to your parents. But there was one girl there that turned 18 and her parents did not want to come pick her up, so she just walked off the mountain and we never heard from her again. Yeah, they can't force you to stay there if you're 18. You're a legal adult. You can leave. But I also saw girls turn 18 and stay there because they wanted to. I don't know. I don't know what the fuck was wrong with them. I have no idea. But I've told you guys this is a brainwashing program, and it most definitely brainwashed a lot of the girls there. For sure. I didn't allow myself to be brainwashed by the program, but the girls that did, they're different. They're very different now, for sure. There were 5 girls that all got expelled at the same time. So on the campus, there was a pretty big pond that we would go canoeing in the summer. In the middle of the pond, there was this little island, and these 5 girls stole all the canoes, took them to the island, and lived on the island for about a week. During this time, they would sneak off of the island and join the group to break as many rules as they possibly could, such as waking everyone up at 3 o'clock in the morning by flickering the lights and screaming, starting fights with almost every staff and student, including myself, punching multiple staff and students in the face, throwing rocks through windows and breaking them, stealing food from the kitchen and throwing food at other students, a lot of screaming, a lot of cussing, just lots of fights. These girls all got expelled on the same day, and they just went home. But what staff told us was that they sent them to the Dominican Republic. They told us that they got sent to a jail in the Dominican Republic where they don't have human rights until they turn 23 years old. Like, the 18 for us is 23 for them, is what they were trying to explain to us. That's what they told us. I was very skeptical, but I did not want to find out if they were telling us the truth or not, because I really do not like conflict. I don't like starting fights with people, so I didn't want to try to find out. I did try to escape multiple times, but I wasn't trying to get expelled. But that's what you had to do to get expelled, was break every rule you possibly can think of and create massive chaos.
Crazy God story. I used to run a non-profit mechanic company. My full-time job was fixing cars for broke people for free. I never got like a regular paycheck, never asked anyone for money, and I never gave anyone an invoice. People often ask me how I paid bills, bought groceries, things like that. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus talks about how we don't need to worry about our food, clothing, shelter, things like that. He says in verse 33, "Seek first the kingdom of God and its righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you." He was telling us that if we're pursuing God's kingdom above everything else, that meeting our needs is God's problem and not our own. I'm going to share some crazy God stories with you now about how Jesus kept that promise to me and my family. One time on the first of the month, we only had like half the money to pay our rent, and our landlord demanded that the entire rent be paid on the first. My wife didn't have a job at the time. She didn't have any kind of income coming in. I had no work lined up. I didn't have any money coming in. We prayed about it, and God led us to write a check to our landlord that we couldn't cover. I don't normally recommend people writing a check they can't cover, but it's what God told us to do, so we did it. I took this check over to my landlord's house, dropped it off. When I left, I got a phone call from a guy that said, "Hey, I work at a ranch. I got your number. My boss has a couple of vehicles that need air conditioning work on it, and we want you to do it." So I took the job. Took me a couple of days to finish it, and when I was done, they cut me a large check and said, "We refuse to let you do this for free. You have to take this money." Probably 98% of the jobs I did for people, I never got any money for, but every once in a while, something like this would happen where God was providing for me and my family. The check I'd written to my landlord hadn't gone through the bank yet, so this money actually covered that. But not only that, it paid all of our bills for the month, stocked our pantry and fridge with groceries, and we had money left over for the next month. One December, me and my wife had no money for Christmas presents for our kids. And a week and a half before Christmas, 2 different guys showed up and said, "Hey, God put it on my heart to give this to you." And they both handed me money to buy presents for our kids. And they had no idea what our financial state was. One time, I had a guy that called me up and said, "Hey, I found your number. Me and my wife are helping out the single mom. Her transmission in her car is out. If we buy the transmission, will you put it in for free?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I'm installing the transmission, and the husband asked me, "What church do you work at?" I said, "Well, I don't. This is my full-time job." He was shocked. Him and his wife thought I was a pastor for a living and that fixing cars was a side thing that I did. He was so shocked that this was my actual job that him and his wife bought me a truck to work out of. At the time, I was driving a 1990 ghetto-busted Mazda 626, and I needed something different. Eventually, my wife got a job as a property manager. One of the perks of her job was that she got a free apartment with water and electricity paid. When you are living for God's kingdom, you'll be amazed at how he shows up. If you want to hear more about my story or how God took care of me and my family, check out a book I wrote, Crazy God Story, Faith Isn't Blind, available on Amazon. If you can't afford it, I will send you a PDF copy for free if you give me your email address.
This is why you shouldn't go hunting alone at night. I'm a hunter and I like to hunt wild boar specifically. For those of you that don't know, boar are a big problem in the US. A sow can have 2 litters a year and it's not uncommon for a litter to consist of 10 or more pigs. Given that pigs eat anything and everything, it's not hard to see why the Department of Fish and Wildlife makes it legal to hunt them with almost no restrictions. In my state, it's illegal to hunt most large mammals with night or thermal vision scopes with the exception of boar and coyote. I'd been saving for a year. When I got it, I took it to a range and sighted it in. There was an area that was peppered with boar activity that I knew would be perfect for a night hunt. The night started uneventful, mostly me tinkering with my new toy, cycling through the settings. I was a little impatient. I'd spotted multiple deer, but they were out of season, and like I mentioned earlier, my current setup wasn't legal for deer. I moved to another spot I'd seen days earlier that probably wasn't much better than my first, but it gave me something to do and a new angle to look around with my new scope. After an hour or so of glassing the area, it dawned on me. This spot doesn't have much animal activity at all. No rabbits or owls, and the deer that I'd seen were hundreds of yards from where I was. Why was this pocket of land so dead at night but lively in the day? I'd set up around 10 p.m. and it was about 2 a.m. when I started to think about packing up, maybe setting up a target before I left. I heard a crunch come from the direction I came from before. I panned my scope over and saw a silhouette of a small bear. It's important to note that my scope isn't exactly night vision, it's a thermal scope, kind of like a black and white version of what you see in the Predator movies. I adjusted my range and zoomed in. I remember jolting a little when I saw that it wasn't actually a bear, it was a man. Because he was so low and hunched over, I thought I was looking at a young bear. Is that a game warden? It couldn't be. I would have seen the headlights coming up the road from where I was perched. And where would he have walked from? I was 30 miles away from anything on public lands. I was about to call out when I noticed he was naked. No shoes, pants, or anything. I remember being disturbed by his movements like a squirrel or something, twitching, grabbing at the foliage, sniffing around and palming the tree. Was that my tree? The one I'd been leaning against earlier? Could he smell me? The thought terrified me. Then he did something that I still have nightmares about to this day. He squatted and placed his hands in the dirt between his feet and stared straight up like a dog mid-howl. And I heard it, a voice coming from that direction, a female voice. "Help! I'm lost!" There was a long pause, but neither of us moved a muscle. The center of my sights was trained at the dirt in front of his feet. I couldn't bring myself to aim directly at another person. Were they lost? Was it some guy that had gone crazy out here? Why was his voice so feminine? "Help! Please, I can't walk!" the voice called out. That's when I called BS. Not only could he walk, but when I first saw him, he was traversing the land with ease for a naked person. So good that I mistook him for a bear. That's an effing trap. This guy's trying to lure me to him with some damsel in distress routine. Luckily, the lack of activity before had caused me to pack up most of my gear. I think I may have left behind a hat and a sitting pad, but I didn't give a shit in that moment. I took my eyes off of him for a moment to get my pack on. I buckled my chest strap and scrambled for my rifle. To my horror, he was in the same position, but his face was staring in my direction, and I swear I saw a smile. How the hell had he heard me get up and put my gear on? He must have been easily 150 yards away. "F off!" I screamed in that direction. He stood upright and it hit me how tall and skinny he was. Easily 6 feet and very lean. He took a couple of long strides in my direction and I instinctively sent a round sailing above his head into the tree line. He was freaky as hell, but he hadn't really threatened me. What would I tell the cops? He stopped dead in his tracks and hunched down on all fours. I yelled out, "The next one will F you up. Go away." He stayed on all fours and this time I had my sights on the center of him. His eyes were just above the grass like a large cat or something. I was trying to stop my trembling and knew that my voice cracked a little on the last warning. I was terrified. That standoff probably only lasted a couple of minutes, maybe less, but it felt like forever. In an instant, he bolted left towards the tree line and opposite of the road. So much for not being able to walk. I couldn't keep him in my scope, he was moving so fast. He disappeared into the brush and I sent another round sailing high in his direction. I bolted to my truck and I wanted to get out of there. I could hear him in the distance, yelling in this weird sound that could have been a laugh or a cry. I scrambled up the trail and arrived at my truck breathless. I tossed my gear into the cab but kept the rifle in the passenger seat and sped off. I reported to Fish and Game, but all they did was scold me for hunting at night alone, and I never got an update. It wasn't until I told this story at a camping trip that my nephew told me about wendigos, rakes, and skinwalkers. My story scared the piss out of him because the spot we were camping was technically the same forest I'd seen that bastard. He was so spooked that his mom had to take him home and she was really pissed. I'm not sure what that thing was, but I dodged quite a bullet that night. Storytime when a celebrity came into my job and refused to pay. Every so often, we get a celebrity in the restaurant. I've never been here when it's happened though. We're not too far from our city's main concert venue, but the owner still has a strict no comping meals for anyone based on star power policy that we're all apprised of when we were hired. His logic being it'll start as just one exception and turn into all sorts of D-listers sniffing around looking for an ego boost. Ironically, this has never been a problem because the 1 or 2 times we've had real celebrities in, they've never expected a free meal, they've paid and tipped well. It's only the D-listers who act all shocked when the check comes. But we almost never get them either, so it's really not a big deal, until last week. We're located right by my college, and a girl who attends my college was recently on the Dr. Phil show. She was not a featured guest, she did not appear in person, but she was teleconferenced in for like maybe a total of 3 minutes to weigh in on the featured guest's, a friend of hers from high school I think, relationship. But because she was on TV, she thought she was the hottest thing to have ever happened on campus. I'd hear people joking about how she was going around telling everyone she was a celebrity and how she kept expecting people to recognize her. It sounded really cringy and terrible. But I don't know her, I hadn't even seen the show, so what did I care? It was fun gossip for 10 seconds, but I quickly forgot about it. However, this girl's self-absorption wasn't completely baseless. There are a lot more students on campus than usual this summer because so many took gap semesters to avoid Zoom during COVID. Not much is happening around here as we ease back into normal life, so people did get unreasonably excited about someone from our school being on national TV. So she was sort of being treated like a celebrity. She was getting a lot of special attention. She even got some free things on campus and had some people ask to take a photo with her. In an ironic sense, but she didn't understand that. So she decided to start testing the waters off campus, and I guess met with some success because most of the nearby businesses are staffed with students. She soon appeared in our restaurant. She was a nightmare from the moment she stepped in the door. I didn't recognize her at first, but it all clicked that she was demanding a 4 top despite being a party of 1. We were okay with it only because we weren't especially busy. She didn't make eye contact with her server. She wasn't in my section, but I ate up every second of her visit with us once I realized who she was. The first thing I heard her say after the server said hi and introduced himself was, "Menu, water, new fork." Like she was writing out a list. Her server was only just bumped from trainee status and he's barely 16, so it especially sucked that she was dumped on him. He's incredibly shy and sweet. If I'd anticipated the shitstorm this woman blew in with her, I'd have swat with him. But this all happened pretty quickly and I'll usually do anything to avoid serving classmates I don't like. It's rare I don't like a classmate that I haven't met, but there's a first time for everything. Of course, nothing on our menu was acceptable to her as is. She had to get a ton of substitutions and additions. Even her side salad of mixed greens had to be, not kidding, unmixed. She wanted each lettuce, but separately on the plate. Her server explained that the greens come pre-mixed, but she just stared blankly past him and went, "So, separated," as though it was the most obvious thing ever. The kitchen actually accommodated all of her requests because it was a really slow day and there were easy enough solutions to each thing, but she still sent at least one of her plates back. In the 20 or so minutes it took for her food to come out, she asked us how much longer it would take 4 times. She demanded that we change the music we had onto a playlist of hers instead. She made comments about the lighting. By the time she was finished eating, we were seconds away from throwing her out. He asked if everything was alright and if she needed anything else. She said no, so he said he'd be right back with the check. I could tell from her face, even as far away as I was, that she wasn't expecting a check. She looked all sour and twisted. I was dying internally. It was so satisfying. But then she stood up and calmly just walked right out of the door. This is when I had to follow her. I wasn't sure what I was seeing at first. I thought maybe she'd gone to get her wallet from her car or something, but this isn't the kind of place where a lot of people drive. I just knew in my gut that I had to follow up because her server definitely wouldn't. I went out of the door and yup, she was tripsing down the street, tapping away on her phone like nothing was wrong in the world. I called out to her and she half turned around, then realizing I was from the restaurant, tried to pretend she hadn't heard me and went right back to walking, quickening her pace a little. I would have laughed if I wasn't so pissed. So I jogged to catch up with her and was trying to keep the situation nice and calm and allow her to save as much face as possible and was just like, "Oh, hi, sorry, there's just a little matter of the bill," knowing damn well she didn't forget, but figuring confronting her would just feed into unnecessary drama. She looks at me in total disbelief and says that she was going to Instagram her meal with us and that's typically enough when she goes out, without a hint of sarcasm or embarrassment. So I didn't know who she was because her reaction to being on TV was such a laughingstock on campus, but, and maybe this was a little mean, but I couldn't resist. I went, "Sorry, who are you?" And she effing lost it, insisting that I knew exactly who she was and that I was jealous of her and that, wait for it, that's why I was forcing her to pay for her food she ordered at the restaurant. I didn't want to be overly mean, so rather than antagonize her further, though it was very low-hanging fruit, I just told her, "Look, if you don't plan on paying, we'll have to involve the police." She laughed and said, "Well, if you don't know who I am, you won't be able to find me, right?" Honestly, she had me there, but I didn't need to admit to her that I really knew who she was because for all she knew, we had security cameras or would describe her really well. So I let her walk off and I went back to the restaurant and called the police. It was absurdly easy to track her down because I didn't know who she was and that she was posting geotagged posts online all day, including a super angry post about how she had eaten at a restaurant and it had been terrible. So she incriminated herself and let the police right to her. I doubt the cops would have followed up so diligently if it were only us, but apparently she'd walked out on a couple other places that generally didn't recognize her and expected her to pay up, and posted angrily about how the businesses sucked, further incriminating herself. They didn't know who she was, but they described her well enough, and that paired with the post was enough for the police to drag her in. Our trainee server actually had to go down somewhere to identify her. He was terrified when he was first asked, but when he came back he was totally giddy and thought the whole experience was pretty cool. Am I the asshole for refusing to let my niece swim in our pool with the other kids? Last week was my son's 12th birthday party. My family showed up to our house. I greeted my sister, who said she wasn't planning on coming since my niece, 14, was on her period and didn't feel like going out, but thought this would cheer her up a bit. I welcomed them and they sat in the living room to eat. I was watching the kids swim when my sister and niece approached the pool. My niece was in her swimsuit ready to jump in with the other kids. I stopped them and asked my sister if she was really going to let my niece into the pool while on her period. She said it was fine really and that she took necessary precautions. I don't know what that means as a guy, but I know enough about periods to realize that things could get messy. I said sorry, but I can't let my niece into the pool with the other kids in fear of any accidents. She angrily said my boys literally peed in the pool while we were talking, so accidents my ass. I just politely told her I was sorry, but it's different when dealing with blood than with urine, which is way too common in pools, by the way. Again, I said I wasn't going to allow any accidents on my son's birthday and suggested other activities for my niece. My sister blew up calling me a raging, insensitive asshole, then literally and out of the blue told my niece to get dressed because they were leaving. I was in shock and turned in my seat. My parents then asked what was going on, and my sister told them that I selfishly and meanly told her daughter off for wanting to swim in the pool with the other kids just because she was on her period. My mom gave me a look of shame up and down for how I treated my niece and sister when they dropped everything to come join me in celebrating my son's birthday. I said I didn't tell them to leave, but I honestly didn't want to deal with having to clean up a bloody pool. My mom said that I was still in the wrong and that it was God's plan that I don't have any daughters and my kids are all boys since I clearly heavily favor boys, but that couldn't be further from the truth. My wife said I didn't overreact, but at least I could have been nicer about it, but I believe I was polite when I spoke to my sister and I think she took it personally. Was I the asshole in this situation?
Am I the asshole for sleeping top naked in my bedroom? My 18 female mom and I live in a crummy apartment complex in New York City. Our apartment itself isn't crummy. We've taken a lot of pride in making the inside of our apartment look nicer than it really is. But truth be told, the building itself is pretty crummy. So much so that the radiator in my room is broken and I get heat every day of the year, even in the summer. I prefer not to open my windows even during summer because all types of questionable creepy crawlies like to come through the window. So I usually sleep on top of the covers or without pants. Last night it was too hot, so I slept without a shirt or a bra. I have pretty huge boobs, it's no secret, but I was in the comfort of my bedroom and I keep my door closed when I sleep. This morning, I woke up to find my mom staring at me. She scared me shitless, especially because I have a loft bed and she was making direct eye contact as soon as I opened my eyes. She stood there and screamed at me for 20 minutes, telling me to put a shirt on and calling me a ruthless whore for sleeping without a shirt while her boyfriend was here. I put a pillow in front of my body and closed my eyes to go back to sleep. This wasn't good enough for her, and she ripped the pillow from my arms and told me to put on some clothes before her boyfriend came in here and saw me like this. I told her I keep my door closed for a reason, and if she's worried about her boyfriend bothering me, that's more of telling her boyfriend, not me. She was absolutely seething and told me I'm to live under her rules while I'm in her house, and that includes not being trashy and sleeping with some clothes on. I figured she was being ridiculous, but her boyfriend heard the commotion, ended up coming into the room to get her without knocking, mind you, and left me flailing. Am I the asshole for not paying to change my father's gravely insulting gravestone? My father and mother had a very bitter marriage towards the end of his life. He had a long-running affair with another married coworker, and he got her pregnant before he passed away. He was planning to leave my mother, skip the country, and move to Canada to start a new life with her. They had a house picked out and everything. He had moved out and was living with his coworker when he suddenly died of a heart attack while having intercourse. Divorce papers were never filed, no legal separation. They were in the process of moving all things legal but on paper, they were still happily married. Now, me and my siblings are already out of the home. Our youngest sibling is 19 and is in college. I work for a tech company and I'm currently back in my hometown helping my mom manage his estate. Well, to say the least, my mom was hurt and very petty and marked his gravestone as, and I quote, "In loving memory of John Doe, son, husband, father, and adulterer." My dad's family and his pregnant, married partner are mad, and they want me to fix it. Personally, though, I think it's fine. That's who he was. He was all of those things. And since it's my mom's plot, I can't do anything about it. Have any of you ever been through a cemetery and seen any headstones, even remotely like this? If you have, or if you haven't, let me know. Or let me know what your reaction would be if you walked past a gravestone that said, "In loving memory of John Doe, son, father, husband, and adulterer."